Welcome back, and now that we've answered the harder question, if there is really a right college list, Execututor wants to offer you practical tips on what is an infinitely more fun task, putting together a list. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Weiner, and I'm here to help you with this. Welcome to the Execututor 5-part series on college admission. I am your host, and I'm here with sound engineer and producer Janice Domingo as we discuss making college admissions anxiety-free.
Thank you again, Dr. Weiner, for having me back. So last week we discussed, is there such thing as the right college list? And we got a lot of useful information from that. And this next episode pretty much goes hand in hand with that previous week's episode. So we're going to go into what tips can you and Execututor offer a student and the student's parents for putting together a college list?
College admissions should not be seen as a talent contest in which the person who gets into the most prestigious schools wins. So that's the general way it's seen, but it distracts from the main purpose. Higher education after high school is meant to train you for a career. So you should go somewhere that can best do that during some of the most vibrant and creative years of your life. You want to be somewhere you feel comfortable and happy. It's not that you shouldn't be challenged along the way, but you definitely want a place where your basic needs are being met. So I do have 5 concrete tips for this. So 1, I would choose a university that has good departments for exactly what you want to study. So last week we had an example of a student who wanted to study education and decided that her parents wanted her to go to the University of California. Well, they don't have education departments for undergraduate, but it can also be a little more specific than that. So you want to study biology. There's a lot of universities that have strong departments in the sciences. There are others that are specifically in terms of biology, but if you have a sense of that you like marine biology, let's say, then you're going to have a lot easier choice really narrowing down the thousands of possibilities from biology departments to marine biology. There's only so many of those. So you have that, UCSD, for example, for marine biology. So having going and doing the homework and researching and finding out what universities are strong for the specific areas of study that you're interested in is important. Secondly, I would definitely make sure you know what you're getting into when you choose location. Again, last week I had the example of a client from the Caribbean who chose mainly schools in New England, had no idea what New England weather was like or the personality type in New England, the kind of culture that exists there. Another student who was coming from an international, foreign student from an international context and wanted a more cosmopolitan city, hadn't really thought about that when they decided to go to the agricultural heartland of Davis. So definitely know what you're getting into when you choose locations for these schools. Don't just then choose it based on the school itself, but also where it is. Number 3, I would say small versus large. That is a very important decision that you're going to have to make is, do you want a smaller liberal arts college or smaller community college or whatever it is versus a massive state school or a large private university? There's going to be very different experiences in terms of the kinds of faculty that you're going to get at those schools. When you're at a small liberal arts college, you're going to get certain professors who have chosen to go there that really are interested in teaching more than research. For a professor, that's a huge career decision whether they're going to go teach at these small schools because they know that they're going to have to focus more on their students and on the quality of teaching versus research. That's going to be what determines their tenure. So You're going to get, as a student, a very different experience if you go to a small school that's teaching focused versus a major university with research-oriented faculty for whom their undergraduate students may be less important, or for whom they're willing to put on a good lecture, but are not willing to spend the time getting to know you one-on-one or to help you develop your talents. Number 4, a competitive school versus one that uses other kinds of assessment. So most schools use what I call a competitive form of assessment. That's a A, B, C, D grade scale, or one in which you're being measured against other students, the so-called grading curve. So in that kind of system, if you could have an 85 average in a class and end up with a C- or even failing, because it's a very competitive way of judging students. So if the grand majority of students have a 95 on a particular test and you've gotten an 85, you will be on the lower end. It's a very competitive way of assessing students. And then there's other schools like Brown University, some of the smaller liberal arts college, I believe Mills College, which is going to evaluate students without grades. They're going to have written assessments. And that will take the pressure off of exams, and more assessing students based on projects, based on long writing assignments, or other means. So that's going to create a very different experience for you. And then finally, I would say, then this is where it starts to get a little more nitty gritty, is look at the placement rates for graduate or professional school or career placement. A lot of schools, most infamously, the art academies, are very, very, very slick at getting students to join and say, major in this illustration or design, and you'll get a job. But they're not willing to give placement rates. And so a lot of students will go to these schools, spend a ton of money because they have, of course, high tuition, and not have a lot of help with getting a job. Or they will be sold a major for which there's not much of a demand, that it might be, the marketplace might be saturated. So they're unscrupulous. So it's really, really important for you and incumbent upon you, the student, not allowing yourself to be sold into something for which there's no demand, a career for which there's no demand, or a school that simply does not have a record placing their students or getting them into graduate school or professional school. There's some schools that are much better at others, and you'll find schools that you may not perceive to be as prestigious that actually have an excellent track record for getting their students into particular programs, like say medical school, because they have the support for their students. They really help prepare them for the exams. They give them practical courses that medical schools seem to like, etc. So and there's schools that are really going to put a lot of money and energy into their career counseling, and others that don't. So I went to a university that had a career services center, but wasn't really helpful, and they just figured that, I don't know, that students would just manage to land these things just based on the fact that a lot of companies came and recruited on our campuses, but they were not very helpful, where some universities will really put a lot of infrastructure into making sure that their students are able to get jobs or have an easy time applying to graduate school. So that's going to be really important for you to look into.
Again, wonderful information there from Dr. Weiner. There's a question that just popped in my head while you were talking about researching the college there. Graduation rates, how real is that when you look up a college and see like what percentage of the student body actually graduates or joins the workforce? That should be one of the things that should factor in. Is that correct?
Graduation rates are really so you have statistics on how many students who enroll actually end up graduating. That's really not going to give you a good sense of how well they place students in careers, but it is going to give you a good idea of how much infrastructure and support they give students to make sure that they are able to stick to their program and get through. So that has a lot to do with how well they support their students, how selective they are at choosing students to attend that are qualified and able to get through the program, rather than just some schools will accept a lot of people and then allow them to get weeded out through the system. Some of the bigger state schools will do that. So the graduation rate is really going to give you a sense of the support that they're offering you. Job placement or acceptance rate into graduate programs is really going to give you a better idea of, if you do attend, how well is the school able to make it possible for you to go on studying or to get a job? So those are two different kind of ways of assessing the quality of the program. One's more support, and the other one is about placement.
My next question is, because you did touch on it briefly, is I guess class size. Like, there are some larger classes, there are some smaller classes. And for me, I know going through school, I knew I liked a smaller class size. I liked being able to have one-on-one attention with the professor if I had any questions, or the lecturer. I mean, for me, that's a big deal. Is that something that students should also take into consideration when they're putting together their college list?
That fits right into the third point that I mentioned, which is small versus large. So large universities tend to have large classes. That goes hand in hand. And then the small schools tend to have smaller classes. Of course, that's not always the case. So a well-endowed private university that may have a large number of students has the resources to have a lot of smaller seminars for students, kind of upperclassmen. So those are all things that you should look into. Another factor that you might consider in terms of large versus small is, are you getting attention from professors versus graduate students? So you can have a school like UC Berkeley, which is a great place. I went there for graduate school. It was a fantastic place to be a graduate student. Not such a great place to be an undergrad, though, because they have a lot of classes that you have to apply to get into. You may not get into it the first or second time. And then, of course, your graduation is going to be delayed by whether or not you get into those required classes or classes that you want to take for your own portfolio. It may take some time because they have a lot of students and not as many resources as, say, a private university where you don't have to compete to get into a class. And then, of course, some universities, like where I went for undergraduate, you got taught by some of the most important professors in the world, and you got that one-on-one contact, which was great. I wasn't getting taught by graduate students. At a place like UCLA or UC Berkeley, chances are, until you're an upperclassman and taking upper division classes, your main contact is going to be with graduate students.
Again, so much great information there, Dr. Weiner. Thank you so much. Where can our listeners get all of this information from?
So you can go on to our website, execututor.com. That's execututor.com. And we have a lot of information there and anecdotes, ideas for preparing. And you can also fill out a contact form there with any questions you might have, or to schedule a free initial consultation. And thank you for joining me in my 5-part series on college preparation and applications. In our next session, we'll imagine you now have a list and have to get ready to filling out the applications and writing those essays upon which so much seems to ride. I'll give you tips for writing short essays and the personal statement.